Hi, I'm Ben April, Chief Architect at Domain Tools.
Hi there, I'm Paul Vixie, founder of Farsight Security.
Welcome to this episode of Reflect and Amplify. Today, we'll welcome Paul Mockapetris, inventor of the DNS, former director and board member of Farsight Security, and chief scientist and board member at ThreatStop.
So before we launch, I want to say what I always say. We want this Reflect and Amplify series to be as relevant as it can be. And for that, we need you. We need input from you. And the information path from you to us is an email alias, reflectamplify, all one word, at farsightsecurity, all one word.com. So please keep those cards and letters coming. Now, if you're joining us live, there's a YouTube chat, and we hope you will ask questions. This isn't exactly an AMA, but it could turn into that if that's all the questions we get. But really, if you've got something you'd like to hear more about as we go by it, you have a way to influence it. And our moderator will let us know what to do next based on your input.
This is also a good time for us to ask for your help feeding the YouTube algorithm. Any comments, likes, subscribes, etc. help raise the profile of Reflect and Amplify. So if you think other people should see this, jump in. With that, let's welcome Paul Mockapetris.
It worked.
Yay. Hello, Ben. Hi, Paul.
Hey,
Hi, Paul.
All right. So Paul.
I guess. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're up to?
Sure. Well, as you said, I invented the DNS, which makes most of the things on the internet run. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about its second job, which is to make some things not run that you would rather didn't. Spam is the typical thing. The title that we had was about do parents owe protective DNS to their children, or is it child abuse if they don't protect them? But we're going to talk more broadly than just the parent-child thing. ThreatStop exists to provide outsourced DNS and IP filtering to its clients. One of the things that we believe is the policies you want to use about what you want to see and what you don't should be up to you. More importantly, or equally importantly, we don't tell you how to do it. We don't say, oh, ship all of your DNS queries out to the cloud and we'll analyze them and send you back the results. If you want to do your filtering on site, that's fine. If you want to outsource it to the cloud, that's fine. We even provide a version that you can run in your laptop, which lets you run protective DNS in your laptop so that you don't necessarily have to believe what the copy shop tells you. What are we doing today? One of the things that's kind of interesting is there's ownership of various network assets and so forth that's changing in Ukraine. We have a bunch of people who want to carry on their commercial relations as long as possible with people in the Western Ukraine, but not with the East. And there's various government mandates coming down about who you should and should not talk to. And so we exist to try and keep track of who owns what real estate, or at least that's one of the current hot buttons, and let people implement whatever policy that they want to have. I think that, just going back to our title, it's, there's an idea out there, and there's a screed that came out from the Internet Society today about how the internet is free and open and so forth. I believe in it. I would like to see an open internet. I would like to see open roads, but if there was a Russian tank coming my way on the open road, I'd have some reservations about it. Network traffic is the same thing. So I think, what you really need to do is to think about what it is that you want to limit. And the child abuse thing is something that pretty much everybody can agree on. But I think that a better way to think about this maybe is to think of the internet as basically more technology that allows different networks to connect and cooperate. I'm an old guy, so I know that this interconnection happened first at the email level, sending email around between different mail systems. A lot of academics had it long before we could send internet packets, you know. So, I just view it as technologies to allow separate entities that want to connect for mutual benefit to do so. And I think the implication is that, well, you may decide either on the basis of the entity or the kind of traffic that there's no mutual benefit or there's no benefit for you. So being able to tailor that interconnection, I think, is the key to what we want to get done.
Well, so
I'm going to let you guys comment.
let me jump into one thing you said, because I started the first anti-spam project, which became the first anti-spam company, and some people who, including one person still at Farsight, helped invent the RBL, which was the first distributed reputation technology. And it's because of what you said, right? If the internet exists so that communication can progress along lines of mutual benefit, then when the benefit is not perceived as mutual, you ought to be able to withhold your consent. And so I believe that very strongly, and I always have, but I have taken an awful lot of complaintage from people who think that the internet is supposed to be the post-national order and that nobody should be blocking anything and everybody has a right to say whatever they want to anybody for any reason, and that I clearly did not get the memo. So I think this is vital. And that's why I got involved later than you, Dr. Mockapetris, in the policy-based filtering of DNS traffic. Although I shot for a larger market, this thing that we do now called DNS firewalls with RPZ is meant to be a grand unifier rather than a single company solution. But this idea that DNS can be filtered or should be filtered is still highly and maybe toxically controversial to a lot of people. And you mentioned a Russian tank, but you also mentioned spam, and there's a whole lot of people who mean us harm. I think that it is a rational act to say, look, if you're going to use your internet identifiers, your domain names, your IP addresses, whatever, to do harm to me, and I can predict that's going to go on, then I'm going to revoke your ability to use those here. That's all it is. It's no different from a firewall, but at a different level. What I'm wondering is, now that ThreatStop is a big kahuna in this market, you must also have gotten some people to complain to you and say, Paul, what the heck are you doing? You're breaking everything.
Well, there was a bunch of people that told me that they had evaluated it and the DNS would never work. And I told them, well, it works in practice, if not in theory. Okay, so, RPZ is incompatible with the theory of the internet that a lot of people have. But, the practice is that we've had customers who say, well, we'll try it out. There'll be too many false positives or whatever. And one trial we had, it was great. We said, you shouldn't be talking to the server in Portugal because it's owned by bad guys. And they said, well, we don't hate the Portuguese. And I said, well, it's not really it's physically in Portugal, but it's not controlled by the Portuguese government fast forward a year, that same site was part of an infection that took down a large U.S. research lab, and it wasn't the only one. This was one of pretty much anybody that was doing CRISPR research was of interest to China. I'm going to get hit for saying the name of China, but so I think that you just got to figure out good fences make good neighbors. So Robert Frost is my guide here. I think that you minimize, the fact that RPZ can filter DNS is all very interesting. The more interesting part is that although it's one of the ugliest syntaxes I have ever seen, and hard to use.
We did it all for you, sir. I knew you'd be looking at the format we chose for the zone file, and I thought, how can I make the top of his head fly off?
Yeah, but I mean, the fact that it's a lingua franca and that, Farsight, for example, can create a policy that we put in our library, and then our customers would say, oh, yes, we'll have a little Farsight and convey it together with CrowdStrike information. And that we have a common way to express those policies and to combine them and to implement them. I think it's a service because we have to have the good guys cooperating and sharing information. And so having a format that's accepted for sharing information is as useful. I think one of the questions we should approach, though, is, we're not 100% right about you should be able to block everything. I mean, I'm not in favor of blocking the hotline between Washington, D.C. and Moscow. I wouldn't block that. There are people that are petitioning ICANN about, well, the Russian top-level domain, all three of them should go away. I don't think that's right. We could ask about, should I be able to dial, what is it, +7 is the Russian, I think, phone number code, right? Should you be able to dial Russian phone numbers? There's which lines of communication you want to keep open. I think it's less binary than a lot of people think. So I think that, while you're saying that you need to filter, I think that oftentimes you need sort of fine grain. And then there's questions about how do you do it by content? Because if you have a governmental rule that says that, you're not supposed to interact with Russian entities, well, there's a bunch of them that end in .com. And there are a bunch of them that are hosted by US companies and so forth. So, the fine graininess of it is one of the other things that technically we need to cope with. But I think that, there's a notion of duty of care. Our government here in the US distributes its own intelligence to companies about who to block and who not. You have to do some paperwork in order to get access to it from DHS. But I think that's a fine thing. I think that if I was on the board of directors of some of these research places, I would be telling them that, your research is much more valuable than you think. And in particular, even if I've had a thank you lunch after an FBI investigation where they said, well, thanks, Paul, for cleaning up our network. But, oh, by the way, we publish all of our research anyway. And I said, well, but, you're also handing out off buttons for your research. Do you realize that that's the same? So I think there's a lot of parents that need to pay attention to protecting the entities for which they have sort of a duty of care. We always talk about the parent of a child, but the board of directors is no different, and perhaps governments and their citizens. Canada, Australia, they all have that. It'll be interesting to see, how this EU DNS, if it happens, whether or not it has any of that sort of thing in it.
It will.
My personal get out of jail card is I say you should be free to choose.
So that's a lot of it. That's a great point, because a lot of the time that folks are complaining about filtering of this kind is when they're talking about mandated filtering or third-party filtering, where, for example, back in the day with the anti-spam project, America Online was one of our subscribers, and because they didn't want to get spam. And we had a fairly reliable list of the places that were sending it from 1 minute to the next. But their customers were not all on board with it. A number of customers of AOL didn't like that they were experiencing collateral damage because they weren't able to get email from their cousin who happened to be at an ISP that was known to be very spammy. And they were wondering, how is it that this cloudy thing in the middle has become policy aware? How come it's not neutral, letting me receive and not receive what I do and don't want to receive? Of course, it has to do with the infrastructure of the mail server and the package deal offered by a spam-friendly ISP. Hard to explain that to people. Now, the thing I like about the ThreatStop approach, both with the sort of menu of which filter sources do you want to be affected by, but the ability to run that on your laptop means you're not sharing fate with anybody. There will be no mandated anything. It'll just be you being fully responsible for everything that can't be done, including whatever collateral damage may erupt from that. So, I didn't see this coming. The idea of the personal firewall that you guys came up with is just huge. I mean, I run that on my laptop, but it's not a product. Nobody else could do it or should do it like I do. But your thing scales. And I think that was just really insightful.
Well, thanks. I think the problem though is that we have to think about the Internet of Things, because the laptop is the most highly protected device in my home, but there's my TV set, which last time I looked uses HTTP instead of HTTPS to download some of its configuration. And it has a microphone. And, my first Internet of Things bad experience was I used to have a printer with a public IP address. And what I would do is when I left work, I would queue up all the stuff I wanted to read when I got home. And while I was driving home, the printer would be going ka-chunka-da, 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 and printing it all out. But I started getting home and found my printer crashed with a buffer overflow attack. I think, we saw it first. Email was the first, what I would call internet technology, where you could hook together disparate networks. And maybe you were the leader by saying, I don't know, is anybody that doesn't do anti-spam? So, I think people have to get over it and start thinking about doing the same technology at the IP and DNS.
I'm with you.
I wish it wasn't so, but then again, I kind of wish there was free beer.
Well, you can come over here for free beer anytime you want, but we're down to our last official 10 minutes. We can go over if we want, but I wanted to make sure we cover some of the other sort of, agenda rewrites that are happening around all this. Right, the DNS Resolution Path has been under continuous attack since commercialization and privatization began. Everybody wants to be my free DNS provider, and so on. But now we've got the handset owners, the Androids and the iPhones of the world that want to completely encrypt DNS using this DNS over HTTP or DNS over TLS technology, and in some cases bypass the choices that our Wi-Fi provider may have made about what DNS server to use, because that one may have filtering. It may be deliberately, constructively, but deliberately lying about things. And handset maker doesn't like that. And so they're just starting to turn on by default. Mozilla did this with their Firefox browser also. Just turn on by default the fact that somebody is going to choose what DNS resolver you use, and they're going to make their traffic masquerade exactly as web traffic so that you won't know where it's going or whether to block each thing, and to basically build an impenetrable pipeline between the place where the human eyeball encounters the advertisement and the place in the surveillance capitalist center of the universe where those ads are being generated and where the cookies are being tracked. They want that to be theirs and theirs alone. They don't want to share any influence with it or over it with the ISPs of the world or nation states or the Great Firewall of China or whatever there is in the world, and they certainly don't want to share it with my ad blocker. This is potentially going to take the ball out of our hands with regard to DNS firewalls with RPZ, or indeed anything else that a CISO or a sysadmin might want to do to protect their users, their family, their customers, whatever. And I'm wondering if you're running into that at all in your work at ThreatStop.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting because a lot of this is DNS privacy, and I think what it means is that what I call the apex privacy predators, the Amazons, the Googles, et cetera, Facebook of the world, they really don't want to leave the crumbs on the table that an ISP may gather. I myself worked on technology way back when that we used because the ISP wanted to know whether there was any indications that their users were thinking about switching to a different cable provider or a different ISP. But the information that's available in DNS is crumbs compared to the invasion of privacy that you get from those guys. And those guys get to run code in your machine. So the fact that they have decided that they like to control that pipe, and that's just an extension of you don't own your machine anymore. I think it's kind of interesting whether or not this is going to lead to scenarios where you insist that people have to, basically not use a product or be able to run it in basically a virtual machine in order to keep your iPhone or whatever separate. People ask me, is it dangerous to just run arbitrary apps in your phone? And I said, no more dangerous than sharing a needle. And the fact of the matter is that, what I want is an iPhone that's pretty much is running strict virtual machines. And maybe I'll let the Google app run in one of them. But, the arbitrary mixing of data is not what I want. But I understand why they want it. First of all, they don't want to have to be beholden to the ISP to get it right. They don't want to share those crumbs of information with the cable companies of the world. And why do they get to decide what vendor? I mean, I guess if Mozilla came along to me and said, Paul, you have to select a DOH vendor because we're going to insist that you use DOH, that would be a good thing, I think. I could live with that. But instead they say, well, we think you should use, I don't know, who is it today? Cloudflare, and they could change their mind tomorrow. What's happened here is that we have one browser manufacturer, Google, and a bunch of dwarfs, and they're using their market dominance. Some of that, may be okay. They certainly want to make sure that you click more often rather than less often so that their revenue goes up. I mean, the happy eyeballs, et cetera thing, they really do want that to happen. They want you clicking. They tell me that they don't keep track of what I click on. I'm not sure I believe in that. I do know that, some of the content providers, particularly the big content caches, have, they all have content that I don't want, right? I mean, Cloudflare has something to offend everyone, right? Which you could interpret as saying they're totally fair. I don't know. Are they? We'll stay out of the politics of the day, but it's if you're in the business of getting paid per click, anything that gets in the way of clicking faster is your enemy.
So is it fair for me? How far should I as a parent be able to go or have to go in order to actually get that control back? I mean, it's reaching the point where if I want to block my kid's IoT device from using DOT or DOH, I've got to put an SSL strip proxy in and strip search every packet coming through. But that's now you're getting into a whole different set of privacy concerns.
Ben, you're starting to get old. A while back, I discovered that beyond a certain age, you can't stop the kids. Okay, they will jailbreak phones. They will go to the parent that's the most permissive and use their Wi-Fi. All right. So, frankly, what we do is we want to run separate networks for you and your kids.
Well,
because
when you're talking about kids, that's one thing. But what if my kids are employees and I'm an IT manager or a CISO?
Yeah, well, then you probably have to go the route you're talking about if you want to control that. It's particularly with software as a service, that's wonderful in a lot of ways, but oftentimes it means that the service gets to decide what's right and what's wrong, not you.
So we're down to our last couple of minutes, and I think we should try and close with some things that are maybe thoughtful beyond the moment. So I just want to follow up on something Dr. Mockapetris said about folks starting to suggest that maybe Russia should have its domains canceled or something like that. If you ask somebody who's responsible for making sure that .ru is available to the world, that might be a root name server operator. If you asked them, could you please remove that? It's like, that's no. I publish what I receive. I don't even have a way to make that decision, to implement that decision if I had a way to make it. So no. And you go upstream. Well, there's somebody whose job it is to collate all that stuff, and that's the root zone maintainer. You ask them and say, no, I just whatever I can, or somebody else tells me goes in, and you go to them and they say, well, we've got this bottom up internet governance thing, whatever. What you'll discover by trying to do that is that the internet is governed deliberately in a way that provides no such control point. There is literally no one in the world whom you could ask to remove a domain for political reasons who would have a way to answer you other than by saying that's not in my power. That power has been prevented from existing, and that is seen as a feature. And maybe if the bombs were coming down on my house, I would regret that more intensely. But I just have to say that what you get, if there is such a control point, if there is a way to do that, is that will be attacked constantly. Every day somebody will have some reason why somebody ought to be deprived. And the internet can't work if it is subject to those pressures. And so I don't think anybody is willing to say, yeah, we're glad that invasions are happening or that civilians are being bombed or whatever, but you will certainly not find somebody who will say, I wish I could do that, because the people who can't do it today understand how much more dangerous the whole world and all of humanity's future would be if that power existed.
But if you as an end user or a parent, so to speak, want to block that kind of thing, that's a choice you can make. And there are tools to do that. And it's important to make that distinction that, yeah, you can get there if that's what you want. What you can't do is block it for everybody.
Well, Ben, just make sure you always say that's only true if nobody in your house is running Firefox, because Firefox is going to bypass all that.
Sure.
Parent does not get a choice about what Firefox will or will not see in the DNS. The Mozilla people have made that choice for those parents.
And the TV set manufacturer next.
Dr. Paul, is there anything you'd like to leave the audience with?
No, I think that, my last thought would be, you can do this. It'll be good for you. There's a bunch of people that offer it in a number of different ways. And you can be as lax or as strict and tailor it. And you should. Because there's too much bad information of various sorts out there for you to spend your time actually dealing with it personally. You need some automation here.
And is ThreatStop.com the way people could learn more about your DNS firewall, including the personal firewall?
Yeah, it's all there. You want an implementation in a cloud or you want it in your laptop, either way. And you have the same set of policies that you can choose to use.
Cool, man.
Good deal.
All right.
All right, so it's time to get back to work. Thank you for joining us today. We'd love to hear ideas for future episodes and questions. You can send them to reflectamplify, one word, at farsightsecurity.com.
And there's also a thread in the Farsight Labs forum, which you can sign up for at labs.fsi.io. There's no money, there's no spam, there's no personal information collected or sold. It's just a way to let like-minded people communicate with each other, and also a way for Farsight to give stuff away. So please give the forum a try if you have not already.
All right. May your expectations be reasonable.